Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today I'm going to be explaining to you why the AFC North is about to be the most exciting division in 2024. Now, I'm sure most of you are already aware of just how competitive the AFC North was last season, so when I say it's going to be crazy this year, you may think I'm being hyperbolic. Think about it this way, though. Last year, the Ravens had the best record in football, going 13-4, and they won the division. The Browns went 11-6, the Steelers went 10-7, and the Bengals went 9-8. So every team in the division was over 500, and the Ravens, Browns, and Steelers all made the playoffs. All of this and every single starting quarterback except Lamar missed significant starting time between the season, which impacted those final results of their team. Last year at the start of the season, it was imagined that this was the Bengals' division to lose, and while they did, very few could have predicted the order of the final standings. With all that being said, I believe the AFC North is not only going to be even more competitive this year, I also think those standings are going to be almost completely different this year. Let's get to it. Let's take a look at the combined record of opponents against the division last year to assess the strength of their schedule. While the division plays many of the same opponents, there are slight variations in those opponents or where they play. The Bengals by far had the hardest schedule. Their opponents had a combined wins of 166 and only 123 losses. The Ravens were next with 157 wins to 132 losses. The Steelers were next after that with 156 to 133, and finally the Browns right behind them with 155 and 134. These numbers may seem close, but when you start to consider that Burrow only started 10 games this past year, and even early on he wasn't 100%, Deshaun Watson only started 6 games, and Kenny Pickett started 12. You can start to get a sense as to why these minor differences in strength of schedule matter. This season, however, looks to be even more interesting because barring any injuries or surprises, the 4 starting quarterbacks in the AFC North are going to be Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson. And while 2 of these quarterbacks have been ranked in the top upper echelon over the past few years, the other 2 are going to need to kind of come back to form to help their teams compete. But just like the Browns every season, it looks good on paper. Let's start with the last place team from 2023, the Cincinnati Tiger Bees. We'll begin with their free agency moves. So they tagged T. Higgins, and while he has asked for the trade, that seems unlikely given his production, unless someone is willing to pay big and then sign him as well, which doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that with Tyler Boyd gone and the hope that Burrow is going to stay healthy, Higgins will have a career year and boost his stock for next year's free agency. They did re-sign tight ends Drew Sample and Tanner Hudson and running back Trayvon Williams. With those re-signed, they moved on to adding new players such as Zach Moss, Mike Gesicki, Sheldon Rankins, Von Bell, and of course Geno Stone. The other change is that they traded Joe Mixon to the Texans instead of just releasing him, getting some extra value out of the move. Oddly enough, the only player they did release was safety Nick Scott, but losing DJ Reader may be more important to that hard-running AFC North. Now, I'll be honest with you, Rankins is good and so is Stone, but other than that, I don't really feel like the defense improved all that much. This run game, I believe, will be improved, with the Bengals moving on from Mixon and moving to Moss, as I've always believed Mixon is mid at best, and Moss is better than I think most give him credit for. What will work for Cincinnati is their opponents in 2024. Being last in your division, even at 9-8, does have its upsides. Home games include opponents such as the Patriots, Commanders, Broncos, Raiders, and Eagles, along with the usual 3 AFC North games. Away, it does get a little harder facing the Cowboys, Chiefs, and Chargers, who may be better in 2024 under new head coach Jim Harbaugh. They do also have some potentially easier opponents, though, in the Giants, Panthers, and Titans, who all seem to be in a state of, I don't know what we're doing, but we're bad at it. All that being said, this offense with Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Moss, and Hudson will put up points on other teams, and I expect the Bengals to be right back to the double-digit wins and fighting for the division lead all year. Moving eastward, we now turn to Pittsburgh Circles, who have made some interesting moves during free agency. So let's start with some of their players that they've released. Quarterback Mitch Trubisky, wide receiver Allen Robinson, Patrick Peterson, and punter Presley Harvin. They also traded away Deontay Johnson to acquire cornerback Dante Jackson and Kenny Pickett to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, we'll look at who they signed and who they re-signed, but we're going to start with the re-signed guys because there's only 2 of them. Safety Miles Killebrew and defensive lineman Montravius Adams. Now, for the additions, they've got wide receiver Van Jefferson, punter Cameron Johnson, Deshaun Elliott, linebacker Patrick Queen, and quarterback Justin Fields. Looking over the Steelers' offensive production from last year, which had them scoring only 17.9 points per game, which was 28th in the league, it shouldn't be too hard to improve in that category. I would assume that the Steelers plan to address wide receiver in the draft, as they currently only have Pickens, Calvin Austin, and Van Jefferson. Running the ball wasn't the problem for the Steelers last year. They were in the top half of the league, rushing as a team for over 2,000 yards and 16 touchdowns. They also got better at it as the season went on. At the start, in the first 9 games, they only had 4 games where they rushed for over 100 yards. In the final 8 games of the season, they had 6 games where they rushed for over 100 yards, and that doesn't even include the playoff game where they did also break 100 yards rushing, despite the loss. The real improvement they're looking for is from the quarterback position. Pittsburgh fans are delusional if they think Russell Wilson isn't an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. Well, alright, so they're slightly delusional anyway, but more so if that's how they think. Wilson is an upgrade in literally every category except win percentage, but having a defense like Pittsburgh will certainly help in that department. With Justin Fields able to learn from behind Russell Wilson for at least a year, the Steelers are quietly setting up for the future of the team instead of playing catch-up like they have ever since Big Ben left. With home games against Cowboys, Chiefs, and Chargers, they should benefit from the home crowd and the trip across time zones. Meanwhile, their away games to the Colts, Raiders, Commanders, and Broncos will be slightly easier competition, and that revenge game for Russell should be pretty interesting. I'd love to say that Tomlin's streak of 500 or better ends this year, but I think they're right back around 10-7. The only difference is I don't think that will keep them out of the basement of this AFC North division in 2024. Now for the Cleveland Hats, who seem to be in almost the exact opposite position as the Steelers, because their biggest question mark is, what version of Deshaun Watson will we get in 2024? In typical Browns fashion, they were active in free agency, signing edge Zadarius Smith, linebacker Jordan Hicks, Nyheim Hines, Devin Bush, and quarterback Jameis Winston. In addition, they re-signed guard Michael Dunn and a couple others. They also upgraded at wide receiver by trading for Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos, and while I don't see Jeudy as a true number one, the combination of him and Cooper is a fantastic duo. I also believe that Elijah Moore was underutilized last year, and with him being more involved and the continuation of Njoku being impactful from the middle of this offense, they have a chance to actually match the value of the defense on this Browns team in 2024. Along the same lines as the Steelers, the Browns have a fairly even schedule, with some of their more difficult opponents coming to Cleveland in the Chiefs, Dolphins, and Cowboys. They also have some easier away games too, going to the Broncos, Commanders, and Saints. Now, I don't know what version of Deshaun we'll get in 2024, but with most of the defense coming back and more weapons on offense, I can see this team coming right back to a 10 or 11 win season and getting back to the playoffs on top of it. Finally, let's talk about the Ravens and how they have fared so far in the 2024 free agency with their additions and losses. Most notable losses include Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Odell Beckham Jr., Kevin Zeitler, and edge defenders Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney. Now, the last two in Clowney and Van Noy are still on the market and they still have a chance to be re-signed by the Ravens if the price is right. The Ravens did, however, make some key re-signings like Justin Madubuike, Malik Harris, Brent Urban, and Ardarius Washington. And while they haven't been very active in free agency, they did make one loud and impactful signing with the addition of Derrick Henry. The Ravens have, in my opinion, the most difficult schedule in 2024, with their best home opponents being the Eagles and the Bills. But their away opponents include the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Texans, and the Buccaneers, all 4 of whom were division winners last year. Although Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry is on paper one of the best quarterback-running back duos out there, we still have yet to see their chemistry work in a real game, and if the Ravens can get a competent O-line together, they can make another run at the Super Bowl. But for that to happen, they need 2 starting guards and a right tackle. I do think the Ravens will be fighting for the division title again in 2024, but based on the players they lost and the schedule they face, I can't confidently say that they'll have the best record in the NFL again. That being said, Lamar Jackson has pulled off more with less. The AFC North was the most competitive division last year, and while there have been some changes for each team, as there are every season, the core of the team has pretty much stayed the same, with the exception of Pittsburgh, who I think got better at quarterback. With most scheduled opponents being in the AFC West and the NFC East, it will come down to when those opponents will appear during the season and when those bye weeks are decided. I feel 100% confident at least 2 AFC North teams will make the playoffs. After all, last season, every team had a winning record, and for many of the reasons I just listed, I think each team has a reason to be better this year too. And that's going to wrap up this video for me, so please like the video, subscribe if you're new, and as always, stay safe out there. Go Ravens.